is your full name? Give us your full name.
Robert Nicholas Olsen.
Where and when were you born?
I was born on July 9th, 1938, and I was born in North Minneapolis.
Why don't you tell me about your grandparents?
Well, let me start out by saying we lived on 1707 Plymouth Avenue North in North Minneapolis, right on a streetcar. We lived in a duplex. My grandmother lived upstairs, and her name was Minnie Schultz, her maiden name.
Okay.
And she married, and her name became Hahn, H-A-H-N. She died of cancer, I guess, when she was about 50, 55 years old.
Okay.
My grandfather passed away from pneumonia when he was comparatively young. I don't know the exact age, but in those days they didn't have penicillin, so when you got pneumonia, it was a bad disease for you. But that's all I remember is my grandmother used to take care of me while my mother worked. And my mother was a seamstress, and she worked downtown Minneapolis.
Well, that leads into my next question.
Yeah.
Why don't you tell me about your parents, your mom and your dad?
I was told that they both met at the Minnesota School for the Deaf. They're both deaf mutes. And my dad was like four years older than my mother. My dad's name was Iver Martin Olsen, and he came from a family of 14 kids, quite a large family. Well, he loved sports. He was on the football team, the basketball team, and the baseball team. And I guess when I went to visit the Minnesota School for the Deaf when I was younger, I actually saw his picture up on the wall there. So he must have been quite a good player. He never bragged about it.
Okay, why don't you tell me a little bit about Grandma Dorothy?
But they were married. They had me as an only child, and she was a seamstress, and that was her vocation through life. She used to go downtown and work for a company called Game and Lake, and they were staunch competitors to the Pendleton. I don't know if you remember the Pendleton line.
Yeah, I do.
But it was a very expensive line. And Game and Lake and Pendleton were pretty much competitors. And she always worked at piecemeal. In other words, if she would be paid for the amount of shirts that she would sew a specific thing on her. She was on sleeves, she'd do sleeves, and so on and so forth.
What was your home like growing up?
Very quiet.
Why was it quiet?
It was quiet because both my parents were deaf mutes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I would always say when they got in an argument, and it was at night, I'd always walk over to the wall switch and turn the lights out. I'd keep them out for a couple of minutes, and then I'd turn them back on, and I'd look at them, and they'd be laughing. So.
It'd be funny.
No, but it was quiet. They didn't yell. They didn't. They were always talking on their hands. And
tell me a little bit about how that was.
Well, I had a lot to learn because I was very, very naive as a child. When I went to school, I was petrified basically because I had lived in such a closed relationship with my parents, and in a house where there was no sound, and really couldn't go to my parents and ask them a lot of different questions about life because they weren't there. So I pretty much learned on my own, I would say. Mm-hmm. Even though my mother and father were both loving parents and were both Christians.
Mm-hmm. So did you have a nickname when you were growing up?
I had a number of nicknames. Before high school, I was Ole, O-L-E, and when I went to high school, I was Gunner, Gunner.
Gunner? Why did they call you Gunner?
Well, I was on the football team. I was captain of the football team, And so I suppose I got picked up because, that name was picked up because I was a gunner in football.
What position did you play?
I played a running fullback. I was in the backfield.
In the backfield in high school?
Yeah, I was fortunate. I was pretty fast because I was also on the track team. So I did all right in high school. It was cool.
Mm-hmm. What was the first trip that you took?
What you got to remember is that when I came out of a deaf family, and my parents did not have a vehicle. They didn't have a car. So any place my parents and I would go would be basically on a streetcar or walk. We did a lot of walking. But the first trip that I took was a trip that I won in a sales contest, and that was to Mexico. And that's when Sally and I had our first exposure to, really a trip down to Mexico. But we had a lot of fun. We were very apprehensive, very concerned because it was a different country, and we both pretty much, our parents didn't travel with us.
What was your first car?
1953 Ford.
What was your favorite car that you've ever owned?
Oh, I had a 1955 Chevy convertible, red and white. A beautiful car. That was my favorite car.
Why did you sell it?
I sold it because when Mom and I were first married, we needed money. We weren't very. We got married pretty young, so we pretty much had to do a lot of scraping to feed kids and pay rent and do a bunch of other stuff. So I had to. In fact, it went bad. The engine went. Something was wrong in the engine. It was going to cost a lot of money, and quite frankly, I just had it hauled away. Didn't even get any money for it. It's probably alive today in Cuba. I don't know.
Did you play any sports?
Played, a couple. I played football. When I went to high school, I played football and I ran on the track team. And I was fortunate enough to be captain of the football team and co-captain of the track team. So, yeah, and we had a lot of fun. Playing sports is a lot of fun.
Did you play football in college?
I played for a year. Mom had to do a lot of work, and in fact, she was supporting me for a while there while I was going to school. And I did get a scholarship to go.
What were your hobbies growing up?
That's kind of strange, but I used to collect bugs. I just like bugs. And my one thing missing out of my bug collection that I really regret to this day is a praying mantis. You ever seen a praying mantis?
Yes.
They bite.
Yeah, they hurt.
Well, anyway. And I also had a coin collection and a stamp collection.
Okay.
Which I still have. I don't have the bug collection.
You don't? What was your first job?
Okay, the first job that I can recall was Mpls. He was a Jewish meat market. And my job was to go down in the basement and I would dip the chickens in the hot water and pluck the feathers. And I would hang them up on a hook so when the rabbi came by to bless them, because they had to be kosher, and the rabbis had to bless them, would go and they'd all cut their neck, the mother would bleed because they couldn't have any blood in the inside. And I'd sit there and watch them, and then I'd take them all down, put them on, wash them again. And that was my job with Mpls. Some of the other jobs I had, I used to set the marquee at a movie theater. And if you remember the old movie theaters, they always had this canopy that came out. And on the side of the canopy, they always have now playing, and then they give the name of the thing. And I would have to hang over the side summer, winter, rain, smooth, sun, whatever. And have to change all that every time a new movie would come about. And saw a lot of movies, back in the 50s. It was back in those days. It was a good thing. I set pins in a bowling alley. Drove a van, an old Chevy van, when I was, I think, 14 years old. I think if you remember, I mentioned living on Plymouth Avenue. If Plymouth Avenue is a duplex, we lived here. Right next door was Gold's Variety Store, which was a store, and above Gold's Variety Store where people lived. They had apartments. And next to that was a grocery store. Well, and our back alleys were all somewhat common. So I always pretty much knew the owners of the grocery store and the variety store. And one day, I guess he lost his employee to go deliver groceries, because I had happened to walk in to buy my sunflower seeds and popsicles, which I used to frequently do. He threw me the keys and says, "Can you work for me today and drive my truck?" Well, I said, "Sure," like a dummy. I'd never driven a truck. My parents never had a car, so I didn't have any idea.
Did you have a license?
A license? 14? No way. No way. And so I ran next door to my next door neighbor's friends, which lived above Gold's Variety Store, ran up the back veranda and said, Bill. I said, "You know how to drive a car?" And he says, "Yeah." And I said, "I got to go drive this thing." I said, "Can you teach me how to drive it?" He taught me in 5 minutes, and I delivered groceries, I guess, for 2 or 3 or 4 weeks. And I worked in a bakery cleaning pans with my dad, and I did that quite a bit. So that was really my longest job as a child. After I got married, I worked for a company called Record Service, in which it was a rack jobber, and I used to in fact, traveled 3 states, and we had J.C. Penney's, we had a lot of the drugstores, and they were racks of phonograph records, and I would go in and I would service those racks, selling phonograph records and it was quite a tedious job. Went from there, and I went. In fact, the company went belly up, and I answered an ad in one of the papers, and ended up at a company called K&M Electronics. And I was taught how to sell electronics at that point. I remember back in the 50s, and all the technology at that point was tube type. But I started out selling language laboratories, and they were a federally funded product that I could go into a school and go into the foreign language department and see if they would be interested in a language laboratory. Well, by the time I was through, I think I had sold something like 40 language laboratories in the state of Minnesota, and they were all, and the language laboratories would vary anywhere from, in those days, $10,000 on the small end, all the way into $50,000 on the high end. And had a lot of fun stories about selling those labs. And then eventually got selling, that's when videotape recorders first came into view, in which a videotape recorder weighed 103 pounds, or 104 pounds. Worked for a company called Video Midwest. Sold the Metrodome, all the electronics in the Metrodome.
What did you sell to the Metrodome?
I sold basically color cameras and a complete origination suite internally. Nothing from the outside. In other words, what you see on television today are television trucks that come in to like a Metrodome. And the Metrodome has their own system that they produce videos and display them on their own screen on the inside. That was a big account of mine. I had a lot of very large accounts in the Twin City area. So in essence, sold a lot of equipment. And as technology got more and more sophisticated, more and more miniaturized, the companies and corporations like Sony, as an example, would kind of take over the industry. So I kind of got out of that and went to work for a company called Ikegami. Ikegami has always been on top, in the top bracket of broadcasters. They've always been a camera that if you talk to an engineer, they prized it. They thought it was very, very good. Anyway, sold a lot of cameras for Ikegami, and then pretty much retired after that.
Can you tell me the story about when you played pool?
Well, remember, both my parents were deaf mutes. One worked during the night and one worked during the day, so I didn't see them very often. So I had a lot of time for myself. And actually, right down the block, a block and a half away, some people moved in and opened up a pool hall. Well, I had never played pool, and I was kind of wandering around, and this guy was standing outside of his door and said, "Hey kid, did you ever play pool?" And I said, "No." And I thought, well, and I had some street smarts, so I wasn't completely naive when it came to, strange men and so on and so forth. But he says, "Hey, come on in and play some pool." Well, I was kind of fascinated by the pool game, and probably about 6 months later, I found myself playing for the house. And when you play for and I'm sad to say, we played for money. And I made a pretty good living, actually, playing for money, and I was like 14, 15 years old. And we had one deal in which he said to me, the owner, his name was Irv. Irv said, "Hey, I got a guy coming in Saturday. I want you to play for the house." And I said, "Okay, fine." So went in Saturday, all set to play. The guy came in, and unbeknownst to me, he said, "Yeah," he said, "we're playing for $100 a game." Well, you got to realize, back in those days, $100 is a lot of money.
Oh, yeah.
And I was a little bit nervous, and I said, "Irv," I said, "come on." I says, "if I lose," I said, "what's my obligation here?" And he said, "No, nothing. If you lose. I got confidence in you, Bob, you're going to win." Well, I won 3 games out of 3 games. And everybody was happy and so on and so forth. And got some money, went home, put it in my top drawer, and my dad came in and started asking me, "Did you play pool, on such and such a day with this guy?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Did you win a lot of money?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Where's the money?" And I said, "My top drawer." He grabbed the money, he turned around and looked at me and says, remember, he was night foreman at a bakery. Well, it happened to be one of his employees who had a family who I beat playing pool. So he took the money and obviously gave it back to him. And it was kind of a traumatic day.
So you were a pool shark.
Well, not as good as some guys. Like I said, I had enough street smarts to know that there was a couple guys I wouldn't play for money because they were really, really good. Playing pool is just not hitting a ball in a hole. It's hitting a ball in a hole plus lining your cue ball up for the next 2 shots. Not 1 shot, 2 shots. So you have to put all kinds of English and all kinds of curves and all kinds of bankings and caroms to get where you want to be on that second shot. But anyway.
What was your favorite job?
I really can't say. They were all kind of jobs that I had to have and had to make money really to kind of support my family. It was just, I suppose working for Ikegami was my favorite job because I could work out of the house. I'd talk to chief engineers through all the different broadcast stations in a 5-state area. Take them out to lunch, take him and their wives out to dinner sometimes, and it was kind of fun. I guess it would be a Kagami.
What are your hopes for your family?
Oh, come on. I mean,
It's
you
on the list. I didn't write it.
But you don't have a book. I mean, I have to write a book. Well, I hope they all succeed in what their individual goals are in life. And I hope that they all maintain a level of Christianity so that they're all accept Christ as their Savior, which they already have, but I want them to live their life as Christians.
What is the most important thing that you've learned during your life?
Most important thing is how to be a Christian, or to accept Christ as your Savior. That's the most important thing. I just wanted to bring my mother into it because she was a prayer warrior. I know that in my growing up and all the learning that I had to do by trial and error, because being a son of deaf parents, I mean, I didn't have anybody to go to ask questions or confide in or do anything. I had to kind of learn by myself, and I think my mother thoroughly knew that. So she was constantly praying for me, as well as my mom, as well as your mom. She'd always be there. She was a great mother. Couldn't ask for a better mother in the whole world.
What kind of music did you like?
Oh, I was always into the 50s music was always kind of just started things. When I worked for Record Service, the Beatles first came out. So I had a rush of Beatles stuff. Never really kind of cared for the Beatles. I like the Frank Sinatra stuff, the mood music more than anything else.
What is your favorite song?
I don't have a favorite song.
It's not Tall, Cool Woman in a Red Dress?
Oh, well, that came later on. I think it's a tall woman in a black dress.
We're going to have to look it up now, aren't we?
Yeah, I'm going to have to look it up. I have it in there.
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
So it is. That might be your favorite song.
Yeah.
How did you know you were in love?
How did we know we were in love? We didn't know, we just got married. No, we knew. We knew we were in love. It was love at first sight.
What did you find challenging during your first years of marriage?
We started having children. That was challenging, having the kids. Making enough money to keep the family alive, and buying a house and buying cars, and buying clothes for the kids. That was challenging. We were always challenged. Through our whole marriage, we were challenged.
So what's your secret for staying together?
We love each other, that's why. So whatever comes up, we work it out. We don't, we could have, I suppose in a normal sense, knowing some of my friends, they got divorced over nothing. I mean, if we get all the things that we've had happen to us, are you kidding? Losing a child, that was devastating. Most couples can't handle that kind of stuff. So, there was a lot of things.
What were your children like when they were little?
What were your children like when they were little?
Little hellions.
Well, that's the way they all are, isn't it?
Pretty much. But your grandkids, they're the ones that, are writing all these questions for
Yeah,
you.
but they grow out of it. They grow out of being a little selfish and being competitive with their brothers and sisters and fighting all the time and trying to stand out and be something different, and it doesn't, they all mellow out.
What were your children like when they were growing up, like around Christmas when they were young?
Oh, they were very, very appreciative. They were all, I'd like to say they were all Christians at that particular point. So they understood Christmas as being a holiday for what it's for, what it is. And they were always very respectful of us, right? And they'd always, because Mom used to make really good food. And it was a fun time.
If you could give any advice to someone who is not married, or somebody that wants to get married, or someone who's in love with somebody and they're going to get married, what would your advice be?
Learn how to forgive. Yeah.
Is that just, does she have the same rule as you, or just you have the same?
No, we both have the same rule, don't we?
I guess so.
Well, we both want all our kids to forgive each other, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Well, we had a lot of fun, didn't we?
Yeah, we did.
I mean, we stop and think of all the trips we took, all the different places we went,
Yeah.
all the vacations we took with the kids, remember that?
Oh, yeah.
All four corners of the United States in a van,
Yep.
sitting in Florida with all our money spent, having $100 left that we had to borrow from our daughter to get home. True story. Thank God for $100 in Florida, and thank God for a carte blanche credit card in Massachusetts. The Liberty Bell. Anyway, that's our story, and we're going to stick with it.